Is my screen visible? I'm supposing it's visible to everybody.
Yeah, it is visible.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So the title itself tells you low carb dietary intervention, which means reducing the carbohydrate consumption in your diet to achieve the needed results for diabetes reversal. Let us first try to understand what diabetes is. Today, corporate employees are facing 3 times higher risk because of the lifestyle that they are into. What do I mean by this lifestyle is predominantly the desk job, working at late hours in the night, and disturbed meal timings, and many such things. So the conventional treatment that focuses on managing diabetes does not help in reversing it. It only manages the symptoms. So it does not address the root causes behind diabetes. So metabolic healing basically offers you a path for reversal. So what are the root causes of the diabetes? It's insulin resistance and not just blood sugar. So in the course of this presentation, we will come to understand what insulin resistance is, how it develops, and how finally we reach the status of elevated blood sugar levels. Vast majority of people with diabetes will experience one or more complications if it is not reversed or treated at the root cause level. In India alone, 69.2 million people today have diabetes, and it's expected to rise exponentially by 2040. What is diabetes? By definition, diabetes is a chronic condition where body cannot properly regulate blood glucose levels. This occurs when our pancreas do not produce enough insulin or when body cannot effectively use the insulin it produces. So there are two conditions. One is pancreas is just not able to produce the insulin which is required for regulation of blood glucose, or body is not able to use it despite pancreas working overtime for production of insulin. So what does normal blood sugar level look like? Pancreas basically maintains blood glucose through a delicate balance of hormones. So there are two hormones which are acting in negative feedback loop. One is insulin. Insulin lowers the blood glucose, and there is another hormone which is glucagon that also is secreted by pancreas and that raises the blood glucose. So these two hormones are regulated by somatostatins to keep the body's regular energy needs in check. So what are the key insights? Proper diabetes management aims for reducing blood glucose levels and keeping them at fasting sugar, which is the blood glucose measured early in the morning, empty stomach, in the range of 70 to 90. After meals, if it is measured 2 hours after the meals, it has to be less than 140 milligrams per DL, and A1C, which is glycosylated hemoglobin, which has to be below 5.6, which is also called as HbA1c. Glycosylation means basically the hemoglobin cells in our blood get glycated with the sugar which is present in the blood. So the percentage of glycation of the hemoglobin cells present is basically indicated by A1C. So that has to be maintained below 5.6 for a normal person who is aiming to have proper blood sugar control. So having understood the definition of diabetes, let's try to understand there are 3 types of diabetes. Type 1, which is an autoimmune condition where pancreatic cells that make insulin are destroyed because of the autoimmune condition, which means that body attacks its own cells and destroys them. So that is a type 1 condition. Typically, this develops at a very early age. So 10% of cases have type 1. So it's not a very common condition, though it exists. Type 2 diabetes, which is the 90% cause of modern day diabetes is basically because of body's resistance to insulin or the pancreas failing to produce the required amount of insulin. So these are the most common forms of diabetes which are often linked to lifestyle factors. And the third one is gestational diabetes, which is detected during uh, 24 to 28 weeks of pregnancy. And these used to be a very rare case, but now it is also becoming a very commonly found case amongst ladies who are going pregnant at very late age, or multiple lifestyle related factors also contribute to gestational diabetes. So these are the three types of diabetes. So what are the symptoms of diabetes? Commonly observed symptoms: excessive thirst. You constantly keep feeling thirsty despite drinking a lot of water. Very frequent urination, especially at night. So if one gets up at night 2 times, 3 times for urination, that's a sign. Increased hunger. You never feel satiated, all the time hungry. Unexpected weight loss without taking any efforts. If you are facing a weight loss, then that also is a very big marker. Fifth is extreme fatigue. You always feel tired, particularly even after having lunch or dinner. You are not feeling energetic, you are tired. Blurred vision, difficulty focusing on distant objects, and slow healing wounds. So these are the most common symptoms of diabetes. And a simple blood test, fasting blood sugar, after meal sugar, and A1C test can give you an indication of whether you are diabetic, pre-diabetic, or already or a normal blood sugar maintained person. Type 2 diabetes symptoms develop very slowly over the years, so you may not notice them. Many people discover diabetes only during routine checkups. So doing a routine checkup is a must for anybody who is post age of 30. If you have risk factors like family history, you are overweight, you are over age of 45, then getting testing regularly, even without symptoms, is a must. So that brings us to our first quiz. What happens when your pancreas gets tired? Choose your answer. You can drop your answer in the chat box. There are 4 options to choose from. I will just read out those. Option 1, your body throws a sugar party where glucose crashes uninvited into your bloodstream and refuses to leave. Option B, you develop superhuman powers to detect sweetness from across the room. Unfortunately, this comes with some side effects. Option C, your cells start sending "we are hungry" messages while surrounded by glucose they can't access, like being locked outside a grocery store. You become a walking glucose meter, constantly monitoring numbers like a day trader watching stock prices. I hope you have chosen the answer already. So should I move to the next slide, which will reveal the answer to this quiz? So what happens when your pancreas gets tired? Your cells basically start sending a signal, "we are hungry." That happens because all the blood glucose which is lying in your blood is unable to enter into the cells which are in need of energy. So this brings us to our next topic, that is insulin resistance, the root cause. Root cause of diabetes. Let us try to understand how insulin functions in our body. 90% of diabetes is type 2, and it's not about sugar alone. It's about your body becoming deaf to insulin, the hormone that controls blood sugar. This happens gradually over years before you even know you have diabetes. What happens in a normal body? Insulin, which is secreted by pancreatic beta cells into your blood, travels along the blood through all the organs. So whichever cells are in need of glucose, insulin goes and sticks to the insulin receptor. As you can see here in the diagram, It's like a plug. Insulin comes in and gets attached into the plug. It opens a door for the glucose to enter into the cell. So the glucose channel shown in the green gets opened when insulin gets plugged into the insulin receptor. So after that, after the door is opened, glucose enters the cell. So what happens eventually when there is too much of glucose lying around the cells? What happens is when the cells are full, they don't need any more glucose. They just stop accepting glucose into the cellular body. And what happens in that case is, despite the door is open, glucose is not taken inside. What happens in that case? Levels of glucose in your blood keep on rising. They are at a high level already. They keep on rising because you have consumed a very high glucose intensive meal and you are constantly eating something like that. So that is keeping your high glucose levels in the blood. In response to the high glucose levels in the blood, pancreas is forced to secrete more insulin. That is what it is programmed for. So as a result, what happens is cells are not accepting insulin. They are not even accepting glucose. So in that case, this is the condition which is called as insulin resistance. So to cut the long story short, basically too much of insulin makes the insulin receptors rusty. So it locks on your cells. The locks on your cells get rusty. So the key insulin cannot just open the glucose doors. And that basically is the insulin resistant condition. And that tires your pancreas out. Having said that, let us understand the insulin resistance in further details. So chronic carb consumption. What do? We keep on eating carbohydrate intensive meals very frequently throughout our days. So chronic carb consumption keeps your blood glucose levels up. Then pancreas secrete more insulin. Cells resist in glucose uptake when glycogen stores are full. Let me explain the concept what glycogen means. Body stores glucose in form of a polymer called glycogen. So the glucose is stored in form of this polymer in various locations. Two are the locations for glycogen. One is your muscle cells and second is liver. So liver stores about 100 grams of glycogen and muscles can store up to maximum 500 grams of glycogen to be used whenever body is in need of energy. So body remains flooded with glucose and more insulin is produced when these glycogen stores are completely full. And in that case, when the store is full, cells just cannot accept any further glucose. So that glucose stays flooded in your blood. So that demands more insulin. More insulin does one more thing. When your blood is flooded with insulin, it keeps your cells in a condition that the fat stored in your cells cannot be unlocked and used. There is another pathway that your body runs, excess glycogen. What happens is when the liver is full of its glycogen storage capacity, the more glucose that you have consumed, liver just converts that into fatty acids and triglycerides. All these triglycerides and fatty acids are dumped into your fat cells. So elevated levels of insulin, what it does is it just doesn't allow the fat cells to burn that insulin, burn that fat for energy. So cells struggle to release the energy and then you keep feeling hungry. And then you again eat carbs and this circle of chronically elevated insulin, elevated glucose just keeps going. So the root cause is basically the insulin resistance. But it is definitely possible to break this circle by removing carbohydrates from the diets, because chronically high levels of carbohydrate consumption is the trigger point of insulin resistance. So how do you measure insulin resistance? It's like, imagine it's like climbing the stairs to a hilltop temple. So reaching the hilltop summit is basically acquiring diabetes, but climbing every step is the progression that you do by way of increasing insulin resistance to finally reach the summit of diabetes. So there are 4 tests which are readily performed by pathological laboratories. One is HOMA-IR test, fasting insulin test, elevated triglycerides, and disrupted thyroid function. So these are the tests which are performed by pathological laboratories, which can give you an indication about whether you are insulin resistant. So as I just explained, insulin resistance is the major cause behind several metabolic dysfunctions we face. Obesity is a insulin resistance of fat cells. Diabetes is insulin resistance of muscle, fat cells, and liver. PCOS is insulin resistance of theca cells. Theca cells are the cells present in your ovaries, which are responsible for generation of healthy follicles. NFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, is insulin resistance of fat cells and liver. Hypertension is insulin resistance of kidney and blood vessels. Thyroid dysfunction is insulin resistance of liver and thyroid gland. CVD, cardiovascular disease, is insulin resistance faced by heart muscles. Elevated uric acid levels is insulin resistance of liver. Osteoarthritis is insulin resistance of synovium. Synovium are the membranes which are surrounding your joints, basically. So insulin resistance of those membranes is basically osteoarthritis. Dyslipidemia is insulin resistance of liver, and endothelial dysfunction is insulin resistance of inner linings of blood vessels. So the root cause behind all these metabolic dysfunctions is essentially insulin resistance, which can be addressed through low-carb dietary intervention. So that brings us to our second quiz. What's the real root cause of type 2 diabetes? Eating too much sugar causes immediate blood sugar spikes that damage your pancreas. You inherit bad sugar genes from your parents, and there is nothing you can do about it. Option C, your stomach produces too much acid, which destroys the insulin before it can work. And option D is your body's locks get rusty, cells become resistant to insulin, forcing your pancreas to work overtime until it gets exhausted. I will give you 5 seconds to post your answers in chat box. So, as we just discussed in this section, your body's locks get rusty and cells become resistant to insulin, forcing your pancreas to work overtime until they get completely exhausted, is the answer to this quiz. So, let's try to understand a bit about if the diabetes is not reversed with proper interventions, what are the complications that it leads to, and what mainstream medication actually does in your body when you are detected with high blood glucose levels. I have tried to summarize few medications which are commonly administered to diabetic patients and what those medications are actually doing in your body. Let's try to understand that mechanism. So, diabetic complications. Diabetic retinopathy, it develops over time, typically 15-20 years of unmanaged diabetes. It essentially damages blood vessels in your retina, leading to vision problems and potential blindness. So adequate glycemic control is crucial for prevention of diabetic retinopathy. Diabetic nephropathy, which is basically leading towards end-stage renal disease, leading to dialysis and kidney damage, which is a very painful condition that nobody should ever face. Diabetic neuropathy, typically the peripheral nerves get affected in this particular condition, which leads to loss of sensation, loss of control, and wounds which happen at peripheral ends of your body not healing. So these are the complications of diabetic neuropathy. Predominantly loss of sensation is what leads to wounds also many a times. Cardiovascular disease also is an outcome of a diabetic complication. It increased basically untreated, unmanaged, chronically uncontrolled diabetes increases risk of heart attacks, strokes, and other CVD events due to accelerated atherosclerosis and blood vessel damage. Atherosclerosis essentially means blockages of arteries and veins. Carotid artery disease, which is a subclinical carotid disease that can be detected through biomarkers and atherosclerotic um, uh, methods of diagnosis. It also indicates increased stroke risk. Peripheral artery disease, it is basically reduced blood flows to extremities, which leads to diabetic foot complications and amputations and delayed wound healings, things like that. Diabetic foot, many of us are aware of that. Chronic ulcers that just fail to heal, involving infections and gangrene and conditions like that, which are very severe conditions. Diabetic ketoacidosis, constantly very high elevated levels of blood glucose and extremely low levels of insulin is what leads to diabetic ketoacidosis. Then postprandial dyslipidemia, which is a common lipid disorder leading to cardiovascular disease and increased cancer risk. These are the typical complications of diabetes. They do not develop overnight, as I said. These happen over a long time, over a very longer time, say 20, 25 years of chronically high elevated levels of blood glucose. So taking control over your diabetic conditions at right stage is very important. So what does mainstream diabetic medication do? Mechanism one is force more insulin. So that is literally whip your pancreas to produce more insulin. So that is what drugs like glibenclamide, glimepiride, which are commonly prescribed, do. They basically push your pancreas to generate more insulin. Second way is reduce sugar production. So basically what they do is they stop your sugar production right at its root level, that is make the liver stop producing sugar even when you are not eating. So this is what typically metformin does, and that also makes, sorry. Third mechanism is slow down food. So what happens is gastric emptying itself is slowed down by these medications. So once the gastric emptying doesn't happen, the blood glucose does not rise. So you don't feel also hungry very frequently. So that is third way of lowering your blood glucose that a mainstream medication does. But in none of these conditions, it's addressing the root cause, that is insulin resistance. Fourth is remove sugar, that is flush out sugar. That is make your kidneys work over time and flush out the extra sugar through urine. So that opens a door for kidney damage or urinary infections because of the excessive sugar load that kidneys are taking. Fifth is copy your natural hormones. That is what Ozempic, Victoza, these are the drugs which have still not come in India, but they will be coming anytime. So what they do is they try to manipulate your body's hormones, helping you achieve blood glucose levels. But again, here it is not addressing the basic root cause, that is insulin resistance. And the last medication that is given is exogenous insulin. When your body can't make enough insulin, you just take it through injections. So that's the most painful part of managing diabetes. Carrying exogenous insulin with you on your all the activities is not a simple job, and it's quite a painful affair to take exogenous insulin and monitor your blood glucose levels with the insulin dosage, adjusting those. So this is how typically the mainstream diabetic medication works. In none of these cases, it is addressing the root cause. So that brings us to our third quiz. Here, just I'm painting a scenario. Sarah, just a girl like all of us, notices she's been feeling unusually tired lately and finds herself drinking a lot of water constantly throughout the day. She's also been waking up multiple times at night to use the bathroom. When she gets her annual blood work done, her A1C comes to 6.8. What should Sarah know about her situation? Your options to choose from are option A. Her A1C is normal. She just needs to drink less water before bed to solve the nighttime bad bathroom trips. Option B. Her A1C shows she is pre-diabetic. So she has plenty of time before needing to worry about any health changes. Option C. Her A1C indicates diabetes and her symptoms, excessive thirst, frequent urination, fatigue, are classic warning signs she should discuss with her doctor immediately. The symptoms are probably just stress related and unconnected to her blood test results. I'll give you 5 seconds to choose the right option. So, as we just discussed and tried to understand in this section, the answer to Sarah's question is her A1C indicates diabetes and she needs to see the healthcare provider immediately. So these symptoms should not be ignored by her. Having understood what diabetes is and what the root cause behind it is, what are the symptoms that you face, and what the mainstream medication is doing to your body, let us try to understand how food is first place digested by our body. So what is metabolism? Metabolism is a delicate balance between two processes. One is anabolism and second is catabolism. Anabolism essentially means building. It is building of various functions that body is doing. It involves lipogenesis, glucogenesis, and gluconeogenesis. Lipogenesis is generation of fatty acids for usage in energy as well as synthesis of essential hormones in our body. Glucogenesis is synthesis of glucose from the carbohydrates that we consume. Gluconeogenesis is essentially synthesis of glucose from scratch, that is from any food source like proteins, for example. There are glucogenic proteins which can be, to be very precise, glucogenic amino acids, which can be used by your liver to produce glucose that your body, essentially brain, needs for by way of this process called gluconeogenesis. Gluco is glucose, neo is newly, and genesis is synthesis. Glucose newly synthesized is gluconeogenesis. So these are the few examples of anabolic pathways which go on in your body which support in generating energy. There is another pathway that is constantly happening in your body, which is consumption of energy, that is catabolic pathway, which is lipolysis and glycolysis. Lipolysis, lipo means lipids, which is fats, and glyco means glucose, which is sugar essentially. So lipolysis is a catabolic pathway which happens predominantly in liver, in which lipids are broken down into ATPs, which are energy units of our body. And glycolysis is breaking of glycogens into glucose into ATP for generation of energy. So when are these pathways triggered? When we exercise, when we work, when we move, when we do work with our brain, all these pathways are working. So there is always a delicate balance between anabolism and catabolism in our body, and that has to be maintained for a healthy life. When there is a disturbance between these two counteracting pathways, anabolic pathways and catabolic pathways, that is where the metabolic dysfunction begins. So I have just shown human digestive system here. We consume food through mouth. Our food consists of typically 3 macros. That is macronutrients, MACRO, macronutrients, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. So what are the fates of these? Proteins are broken down into amino acids, fats are broken down into fatty acids and glycerol, and carbohydrates are broken down into simple sugars. Carbohydrates are essentially longer chains of glucose. Those are broken down into simple sugars. So this is what typically happens inside your stomach here. And inside the intestines, these metabolites is what it is called. The broken down digestive products of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates are absorbed in your duodenum as well as jejunum and intestine at different stages, and they are further processed in your liver. So liver is like a check post. It sends the parcels which are received from your blood through your digestive system to the desired locations where it should be parked. So how body basically controls your blood glucose? Let us try to understand how liver functions with the help of these 4 hormones here. These are the key 4 hormones, all of which are secreted by your pancreas. So pancreas and liver are basically the best friends which are sending signals in endocrine way to each other to control body's essentially all the metabolic activities. So what happens is when you consume any meal, it elevates your meal comprising of carb, protein, fats, everything. The carbohydrates basically get broken down into glucose in your liver. So liver just pumps all that glucose into your blood, raising blood sugar. Pancreatic beta cells detect higher levels of blood glucose. They start pumping out insulin. This insulin goes to liver and it basically tries to put the blood glucose into the cells which are in need of energy. When the blood glucose levels rise really very high, in that case, pancreas takes a call by giving a signal through another hormone called glucagon. So what does glucagon, so after the blood glucose gets absorbed in all the cells which are in need, the blood glucose levels in your blood drop. In that case, when pancreas detects that there are very low levels of blood glucose present, it gives a signal to liver that you need to dump your glycogen stores and elevate blood glucose levels. So that happens through signal of glucagon. So insulin lowers blood glucose levels by promoting glucose uptake and storage into the cells which are in need of energy. Glucagon counteracts insulin's role by raising blood glucose by promoting glucose release from the storage. Somatostatin is another pancreatic hormone which is produced by pancreatic delta cells, which basically regulate the insulin and glucagon release from the pancreas. And amylin is the 4th hormone which basically increases satiety, because this mechanism cannot just go indefinitely. So basically, amylin tells a signal to your brain that you need to stop eating now. I have enough of food already stored, and let the hormones take over and manage your energy needs now. So blood sugar regulation is achieved through a negative feedback loop involving pancreatic hormones. When blood glucose rises, insulin is released to lower it. When it falls too low, glucagon is released to raise it. This delicate balance maintains optimal energy levels throughout the day. So any disruption in this mechanism basically puts your blood glucose levels haywire. Now let me explain what happens when you switch your body's energy needs to low carb diet. What you are doing is you are reducing the carbohydrate intake consumption. So what does that do? It forces body to release the glucose which is stored in your storages, which are essentially muscle cells as well as liver's glycogen stores. So that basically when there is low carb consumption, there is low insulin response. In that case, glycogen stores open up, and in presence of elevated glucagon levels, your body starts releasing glucose which is present in the liver cells as well as muscle cells. So that brings down the weight of person as well as it also corrects your lipid profile. So this is essentially the mechanism with which the metabolic correction happens on low carb diet. So here are few experiments which have been conducted on what happens to gastric emptying rate, that is the rate at which food passes through your stomach. Carbohydrates have highest gastric emptying rates. That is, carbohydrates are quickly emptied from your stomach. And the least gastric and the most delayed gastric emptying happens with fats. So if you are having a fatty meal, in that case, you don't need to eat very frequently because body, like a sustained release, body takes energy from fat. To give some physics about the energy that carbohydrates, fats, and proteins provide. Typically, 1 gram of carbohydrate gives you 4 kilocalories. 1 gram of protein also gives you 4 kilocalories, and 1 gram of fat gives you 9 kilocalories. So fat is like an energy bomb. So you also need to consume it in a less quantity. At the same time, the sheer mechanism of digestion keeps it as a sustained energy release tablet inside your body. So you don't need to eat food too frequently. Just 1 or maximum 2 meals in a day are sufficient when you are on a high fat, moderate protein, low carb diet. So on a timeline, this is how it looks. That brings us to the end of this section. So with 4, Sarah, our same girl, just finished a large pasta dinner and her blood glucose has risen to 160 milligrams per dl. Which hormone will her pancreas primarily release to bring her blood sugar back to normal range? Choose your answer from glucagon to further increase glucose levels for energy storage. B. Insulin to promote glucose uptake by cells and storage as glycogen. C. Somatostatin to immediately stop all hormone production. And D. Amylin to make her feel hungrier for a dessert. I'll give you 5 seconds to post your answers in the chat box. As we just understood the mechanism to bring to raise the blood sugar levels, to bring the raised blood sugar levels back to normal, insulin is the hormone that her body will release, which will help uptake of cells and store as glycogen. So having a high carb intensive meal raises your insulin levels, promoting glucose uptake and storage as a glycogen. This happens despite there is a energy need of cells or not. So this also means that elevated levels of insulin with chronically high carb consumption leads to fat gain, because fat cells like a balloon can expand really big. They don't have a real size limitation. It is called as hypertrophy of fat cells, which makes them grow in size by just becoming bigger like a balloon. Having understood some biology and concepts, let us try to dig more into few dietary myths that we all have been raised hearing. To understand this concept better, let us understand glycemic index and glycemic load. What does these two concepts mean? Glycemic index measures how quickly carbs in food raise blood sugar, and glycemic load measures carb content in the food portion. So essentially, glycemic index multiplied by carb percentage in grams gives you its glycemic load. So two key points to consider are low glycemic load means low insulin demand, whereas high glycemic load means high insulin demand. So that is where portion size of carb intensive meal matters. High GI food with small portion size can have a low glycemic load. For example, watermelon versus cake slice, same portion size. Cake slice has higher insulin demand due to higher carb content despite lower GI. So that is the biggest dietary myth that we have all been raised with, that diabetics should consume low glycemic index food, whereas diabetics should be consuming low glycemic load food. So evaluate your diets based on glycemic load, not just glycemic index. So I just taught you how to calculate glycemic load of your food using the glycemic indexes, which are known to most of you. They are present everywhere on uh, dietary databases. So that helps in managing insulin dependent disorders. So glycemic load is what matters, not glycemic index. Sugar, a bitter truth. We all are taught to have fruits as a healthy supplement on fasting days, on the days when you are not inclined to having snacks in your canteens. So there are two types of dietary sugars, fructose and glucose. Both of these are present in the fruits that you consume in different proportions. So what happens is, glucose mechanism we just understood. Fructose is something, it's a sugar that our body doesn't understand what it is as a chemical. Fructose is a compound that gets processed only in liver. And what does liver do with fructose? It converts it into fatty acids. So just having a fruit basically does not even fetch any insulin response in your body so long as it has only fructose. It fetches insulin response because it has a glucose also present in that. But having just a fructose doesn't fetch any insulin response. So it doesn't even fetch any response for the satiety related hormones like ghrelin, leptin. Those responses also fructose doesn't fetch. So that's why high fructose corn syrup containing beverages one can have in a larger quantity. And that is why these fructose sugary beverages are directly linked to obesity. Fructose is therefore classified as a chronic toxin. It only hammers your liver for producing fatty acids. It causes leptin resistance with chronically high consumption of high fructose corn syrup based foods and beverages. Our current food policies do not address this issue correctly. So that's why it's in our hand how much fructose and fruits we should consume. Fiber can counteract fructose effects if the fruit is consumed as it is directly by biting and not by crushing it in a juicer. What happens in a juicer is you are cutting down the fiber into smoothie. So its structure is completely destroyed. What fiber does is basically fiber forms a protective lining inside your intestine, and that slows absorption of fructose from your intestine into blood. So that is the helpful role fiber plays. So the fiber structures which are naturally present in fruit do not get entirely broken when you eat the fruit by biting, because biting cannot shred down the fruit to the level a grinder does. That is why having the whole fruit is better, but just having fruit intensive diets is not the way. There are limits to how much fruits can be consumed. There are blogs I have written on fructose a fact check, which is present on rightnutri.in. You can go later on and read those. Another big myth that we are taught to believe in is calorie in is calorie out. No, our body is not a calorimeter, neither it's a boiler or a combustor or an incinerator. It's a reactor. Body is a reactor. So it processes the food that we supply it with the help of various hormones and digestive enzymes present in our digestive system. So as we just looked, proteins get converted to amino acid. They are not combusted. Like the way carbohydrates are converted into glucose, they are not combusted. Fat, which is lipids, they are converted into fatty acids. They are not combusted. Calorie is a unit of energy which is released by which is released after combustion of a fuel. Body is not combusting any of the fuels that we are eating. Body is in fact using the food that we are using as a fuel to generate the energy, the unit of energy that it understands. And what is that unit of energy? It's adenosine triphosphate. ATP is the unit of energy that body understands to get its energy. So our ultimate goal is to generate ATPs and not combustion, because combustion is not something that happens in our body. So to quickly go through, obesity linked hormonal factors. Sorry.
मेरा remotely काम कर. Sorry.
Yeah. So carbohydrate reduction has caloric reduction has 99% failure rates. You must have tried out eating less to lose weight. Finally, your body needs food to thrive and survive. So it cannot be chronically kept deprived of the food that you need. So body needs energy in form of ATP, which is produced from the food that we eat. So if we are cutting down on food itself, you are definitely bound to fail with your weight loss plan. The energy balance model oversimplifies this complex nature of weight gain. So as we just discussed, what leads to weight gain? It's insulin that drives fat storage. So the aim is to lower your insulin levels and promote fat burning through your body's own fat burning mechanisms. And then blaming individuals for obesity, basically you are not following your diet plan, you are not consistent, you are, then this blame game has no meaning. It basically is essentially ignoring your hormonal and metabolic factors. So historical insights about diet's impact on obesity date back over a century. So this calorie in, calorie out model is something that needs to be trashed and should not be considered in any of the diabetes management as well as obesity related health goals. And the last and the most important, the cholesterol myth. All of us have been believed to, eat less fats to keep your cholesterol down. But there is no life without cholesterol. Believe me, there is no life without cholesterol. Your body needs cholesterol for cell membrane synthesis. The essential flexibility of our blood vessels, our skin, our uh, uh, all the organs, everything is because they are essentially synthesized using cholesterol. Cholesterol helps in various cell transport and signaling mechanisms which are intrinsic part of a healthy body. Myelin sheath is rich in cholesterol. Myelin sheath is a sheath that surrounds your brain. So your brain cannot function well unless there is cholesterol. So we are chasing a wrong elephant in the room by consuming statins and various pills to keep the cholesterol low. So there are four types of cholesterol: chylomicrons, which are essentially lipoprotein globules in your bloodstream containing lipids, that is triglycerides, phospholipids, cholesterols, and proteins. They are like, parcels carrying all these different lipid molecules, because lipids, as we all know from basics of chemistry, they are hydrophobic. They do not stick to water. So chylomicrons is like carrying a packet through your blood vessels, uh, contents of which cannot readily flow through your blood. Low density cholesterol, low density lipoprotein, high density lipoprotein, and very low density lipoprotein. So these are the typical classifications of cholesterols, and all of these are not a bad marker unless you have very high levels of insulin, which what I mean by that is very high levels of insulin and very high levels of triglyceride basically is a important cardiac risk factor. Same way, very low levels of HDL and very high levels of triglyceride is a very big important cardiac risk factor. So which is the elephant to be chased out of the room? Triglyceride and insulin, not the cholesterols, which are essential for synthesis of various important hormones. For example, bile, vitamins, everything has a huge dependence on these hormones. Very vital hormones, female hormones like estrogen, male hormones like testosterone are essentially synthesized using cholesterol. So don't chase the wrong elephant out of your body. There is one comic strip that I had generated. I thought here, let's take a look at this. I will just pause for 5 seconds for you to read the slide here. All right. Having understood, let's go to the path to reversal. What low carb diet is. To understand that, let's go a little backward in time and understand what are the important milestones in evolution of humans. Humans evolved as a hunter-gatherer about 1.8 to 1.5 million years ago. At that time, no fire was present, no agriculture was present. So as a hunter-gatherer, what did humans have? They gathered their food through vegetables commonly as available, fruits, and various animal-based proteins such as meat, essentially meat. So that is what humans consumed as hunter-gatherers. Essentially, their diet was very low in carbohydrates because all the carbohydrates that they got were through the grains which are available in the wild. Fire was detected about 1.6 million years ago. That is when humans actually began to cook food, and then came about 10,000 years ago agriculture. In the development of agriculture itself, the grains that we eat also changed their carbohydrate content to increase the per hectare yield of grains that we eat. There were developments that happened, and grains also went on becoming more carb intensive. So that is typically the evolutionary biology of humans and the dietary patterns that evolved. So that brings us to understanding, having learned the biology, what is a species-specific nutrition for human for a healthy life? Low carbohydrate, moderate protein, and high fat is what is defined as a low carb diet. So quantitatively, low carb diet is typically 20% of your meal should be carbohydrate, 20% should be proteins, and balance 60% should be good quality fats. This diet essentially means that you do not require to consume food more than twice, maximum thrice in a day. You don't need 6 meals a day or 8 meals a day, small portions or anything like that. So it becomes very easy to cook your meals, carry them despite your working hours, carrying them with you, even if you have a traveling schedule, if you are in a marketing kind of a job. So this is what species specific nutrition is. Another comic strip I have here. Life is beautiful when the best friends meet. And which are the best friends? Fat and protein. All the whole foods which are available in nature come with fat and protein combined together. All, for example, animal-based foods are fat and protein together. So you just have those, you are sorted. Dairy comes with fat and protein together. Milk has fat and protein. And a moderate portion of carb through lactose. So I'm just giving few examples, but essentially fat and proteins are the best friends. Both of them keep your satiety levels intact. You feel fuller and feel satisfied with the meals. So you are always away from cravings and you feel your body feels like a luxury living experience. I'm myself on a low carb diet for 1.5 years now, have reversed most of the chronic metabolic conditions that I myself had. So I'm telling this out of own experience, and there are several of those who have done this. So, three essentials of metabolic healing is sleep, diet, and exercise. Since this was a time constraint program, I did not address sleep and exercise part of metabolic healing in a uh, deeper sense. But getting a good quality sleep at night is very important for body to trigger its own self-healing, metabolic healing mechanisms, and exercise. So to put it in an analogical perspective again, diet is basically anabolic, which is building. Exercise is catabolic. So diet and exercise have to be coupled with each other to have metabolism functioning well. And sleep is the rest that you need for the management of your metabolic activities. Another comic strip I have here for you, referring. So we all have grown up seeing this childhood riddle of three little pigs. The pig which builds home with brick and mortar survives all the forces of nature, whereas the one who builds with grass and sticks, both of them lose their homes to the forces of nature. So our body is same. Build it with solid foundation of fats and proteins so that you can thrive any kind of conditions you are required to face in your day-to-day life. So the last quiz of the session, what should you do if you notice changes in your health? Ignore it completely and hope it goes away like that weird noise your car has been making for 6 months. Option B, immediately Google your symptoms and convince yourself you have a rare tropical disease despite never leaving the office. Option C, ask your coworker for medical advice because he once watched a documentary about the human body, or consult with a qualified healthcare professional. I'll give you 5 seconds to choose your answer. So the answer to this question was very simple. Consult with a qualified healthcare professional. Do not ignore your symptoms. Briefly about my background, I got my all the knowledge and experience by working with dlife.in. It's a low carb movement propelled and fueled by Anup Singh, who is a IIT Roorkee silver medalist. DLife was founded in 2014 with an aim to put chronic lifestyle disorders away. So it's India's first and biggest and the only award-winning low carb platform, which is reversing chronic metabolic disorders day in, day out. There have already been 3,000 plus success stories of diabetes reversal. 5,000 plus lives are changed every day through various D-Life coaches in the field. It's the organizer of world's biggest metabolic health conferences for 3 consecutive years. It's India's only biggest CPD-SO accredited course with global biggest 144 CPD credits and India's only recognized, Government of India recognized low carb nutrition platform. You can see the photographs of the founder of D-Life, Anup Singh, and Ira Sahai. Both of them I treat as my gurus in this particular domain. So all the good work that I'm doing is with tremendous gratitude to my gurus, D-Life. So thank you, everybody. So follow me on rightnutri.in. I'm there on X, Instagram. There is a YouTube channel of Right Nutri.